Hello, it's me, Aaron, and today I wanted to talk about the fanservice debate, and also for a tiny bit about Dark Souls 4. Those two have been present since pretty much the beginning of Dark Souls 3, so I think it's time for me to talk about them. So yeah, let's just begin. So, first let's review the evidence of the fanservice things in Dark Souls 3. So, the area and environments. First, Lothric is actually Lordran. Their name just changed after so many years. And through the areas themselves, there are 23 of them, and there are 7 areas that have direct route to Dark Souls 1. Farron Keep, because you can find the Armor of Dusk, and some Mushroom Corpse, both were in Darkroot Garden or Ulasil, which was very close borderline in Darkroot Garden. Smoldering Lake is Demon Ruins, we knew that thanks to the Fair Lady's corpse and the demons. Irithyll and Anorlando being directly an area from Dark Souls 1, and Irithyll being the inaccessible city area under Anorlando. The Kiln of the First Flame, it's an area from Dark Souls 1, the Painted Wall of Ariandel, and in Dark Souls 1, the Painted Wall of Ariamis. The Dreg Heap has multiple areas from Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, including Harvest Valley, Earthen Peak, and the ruins of the First Falling Shrine. So, even if some of them have even names in common, I wouldn't consider this fanservice. The areas are not even really the same. Lothric is not just a change of the name. Pretty much everything but Lordran has changed. Farron Keep is different. Gruth and Darkrai roam there, and it's become more of a filthy swamp than a green, alive forest with a magic butterfly. Smoldering Lake is now a labyrinthine ruin under a massive lake, and a few demons actually remain. They're almost extinct compared to isolates that had way too many of them, thanks to rush development. Irithyll is completely new, and even if you technically saw it before, you couldn't explore it. And yes, I'll give it to you then Orlando, but I think it was a good direct reminder of how much time has passed in the sunny days of Orlando. It's now been overthrown by a tyrant, the gods are gone, and it's cold, so much colder. And I think it was a great moment to realize Irithyll with Orlando, and it's just including an area you've already been to before in a sequel really bad. But coming back to areas, the Kiln of the First Flame is barely the same. And I think I can include the Dreg Heap when I say that all of Lothric and other parts of reality, Drain Lake and Lordran, are collapsing there. The flow of time is as convoluted as ever, and the Painted World is not the same one. How is it wrong to include the concepts you've already seen before again? Wouldn't it be weirder to just have Dark Souls 3 forget about everything that's been told before? And honestly, it has made for some amazing lore and stories. I mean, the Painted World of Ariandel is very different from Ariamis. Ariamis was the place where gods would banish everything they feared, and with each other the inhabitants of the Painted World stuck together until the painting rotted or was burnt, and at that point a painter appeared and painted the next world to hide in, and ever since it's been a cycle of letting go of the previous world and creating another one, separate from those fools on the outside. But in Ariandel, one of the 3 sisters of Londo wants to preserve this world. She convinced Father Ariandel to not burn the world. She's obsessed with keeping this world, but it's rotting, it's all about letting go. And on a side note, I think the world of Ariandel is also talking about letting go of the Dark Souls series. Frida is supposed to be some players, and a lot of Dark Souls 3 is about that. Realizing the state of the world, rotten, and seeing how time passed and the consequences of keeping something that should have died a long time ago alive, if it can even be called that. You can't continue, the embers are just so small now. Selfishly taking it would just create more suffering. You need just to let go, let it die. Like, this is interesting, I like that, seeing the decayed state of Lordran. And Lolgus the Witch pointed something really interesting out in a tweet. The message of Dark Souls 3 is kind of anti-Dark Souls 3. Like, the game stresses multiple times it's self-destructive to keep the world going just for its own sake, and how it would be better to just let it fade away, and allow something new to replace it. The main story is the player acting as the enforcer of an ancient contract, hunting down disinterested people who've given up on the world to make them come back and fulfill their job in a futile attempt to take a burnt-out flame and squeeze another cycle out of it. Like, isn't that a great way to end the Dark Souls series? Like, it was probably not Miyazaki's idea to make Dark Souls 3, but if he had to, he still created a great game, and while doing it, he also sent a message to the players. Just like every other FromSoft game, but this message was also about the Dark Souls series. would try to preserve the fire 2 times, and whether it felt like it was a good choice or not, this time it's undeniable. The world must die, Dark Souls must stop, so that one day, tiny flames dance across the darkness. And that's why I also don't want to Dark Souls 4. And while I think there is potential, new things to tell and older concepts to expand on, such as angels, Londo, and the mysterious deep sea that Aldrich was dreaming of, it's the end. Dark Souls is over, just like the fire. There's just no point in continuing. It's just going to rot more and more until it's no more than a passionless, empty shell of a franchise way past its golden age. But anyways, isn't that something? Doesn't this have personality? Those are things I've so often heard about Dark Souls 3, that it doesn't have any personality, that it's all just Dark Souls 1 fanservice. And I'm not going to tell you about all the lore in detail, but, I mean, Londo, or a civilization of hollows, the Ring City at the end of the world, the truth about the Dark Sign, the blood of the Dark Soul, the Painter, Enslaved Night Gale, the Age of the Deep Sea, the deserted civilization of Cathas, the scholars doubting the licking of the fire, the Grand Betrayal. Dark Souls 3 has its own themes and lore, and it just expands on things from Dark Souls 1, and gives closure. 2 things that Dark Souls 2 didn't do, and Dark Souls 2 didn't do much as a sequel, honestly. There are, of course, similar things between Dark Souls 1 and 2. Dark Souls 1 is important to Dark Souls 2's narrative, but personally, I see Dark Souls 2 more as a spin-off in the same universe. And also, personally, I prefer Dark Souls 3 that acts more like a sequel and continues things that started in Dark Souls 1 and truly ending the Dark Souls series for good, than getting another random kingdom and another story with nothing to do with Dark Souls 1 or 2. If I wanted something new, I would just play Bloodborne or Sekiro. Something really made with passion, something truly new, and not just a story vaguely based on Dark Souls for the sake of it. So now, I'm going to address the other, more egregious evidence of fanservice. Let's start with the NPCs. Andre is back, and while we could say that, time is convoluted more and more, blah blah blah, I don't think Andre has a place in Dark Souls 3. I mean, he barely does anything of importance, and he, just like the first Andre, doesn't have really a questline, and I would have preferred getting a whole new NPC. Then there's the Shrine Handmaid. Honestly, I wouldn't really count that as fan service. She just has the Firekeeper garb from Dark Souls 2, and even if she has traits from them in personality as well, I think it's okay because it shows the convolution of reality. People from Dark Souls 2, during like N1, including Andre, coming back, but different, so I kind of understand it. And Dark Souls 3 made a lot of things, but still, I have mixed opinion about the Shrine Handmaid and Andre. Next is Hawkwood. This one isn't fanservice, it's just the Crestfallen archetype, and if you say he still is, well, look at the Crestfallen guy from Demon Souls. Is Crestfallen from Ds1 Demon Souls fanservice? No, they're just the same archetype, but they have different stories. And there's a Crestfallen guy in like every Souls game, come on. Then there's Sigurd. Not fanservice, he's just another Knight of Katarina. And the personality of sleeping all the time and it's just a common thing in his homeland. And his questline with Yom, I think, makes up for his similarities with Thigmaya, compared to Andre and the Shrine Handmaid, who have barely any differences with their previous appearances in the older games. Now, for something I've not really heard anyone talk about, but I thought it wasn't fair to just pretend I didn't notice it. So yeah, it's Irna, Aegon, and Maiden Astrea, and Gal Vinland. So yes, the archetype is similar. Knights protects Maiden at all costs. But saying that out loud makes it sound so common. And yeah, they both have a big hammer. But except for the Knight with big hammer protects Maiden, there's really not that much. Aegon is kind of an asshole, he even mocks us a few times, but he becomes serious when the life of Irna is threatened. And Gal is always in his serious mood because, well, the only time you interact with him is when you're trying to murder Astrea. And Astrea herself is in the soul of a demon to try and heal the people of the Valley of Defilement, and when you try to kill her, she guilt trips you. She's not a hopeless, blind maiden like Irina, who calls us sweet champion. So even though they're similar, I think the two are far enough away from each other to both be something original and considered new. Next is Scala and Nuria. No, not this one. Yeah, this one's from Demon Souls. And for this one I have to agree. They are exactly the same character, they really are. You both save them from a cell, they both thank you and appear at the hub of the game, they both ask you if you're really sure you want to run the Dark Arts, and they are both really thankful that you saved her. Like, really, I'm sure you could swap some of their dialogue and I wouldn't even notice. Orbeck and Griggs of Vinheim are both pretty similar. They seem like normal average sorcerers, but Griggs has spells from sorcerer's pies, and Orbeck has the fugitive garb, and the only thing which is different is their personality, but they're more or less the same. And finally, for the one I've seen the least but that I've still seen, is Leonard and Lautrec. Both are invaders who appear early. They're both pretty sinister and kill a defenseless woman, and you get a black eye orb that you have to use to get the soul of the lady back. Now, not fanservice, they're both pretty distinct. While Lautrec kills people to offer humanity and souls to Fina, Leonard offers tongues, but at one point he kills Rosaria herself to preserve her soul. Their personality, even if similar, are still different. And the black eye orb is clearly a little callback to Lautrec, but that's just also just how you take revenge on someone. So I think Leonard is a nice twist on Lautrec's foundations. And he also has much more screen time, and I mean, his Rosaria's finger, the mute psycho and the silly lady archetypes are already taken, so the sinister, totally not suspicious guy it is. And it just happened that a guy like that was in Dark Souls 1. And now that we're done with the NPCs, let's talk about the little Easter eggs as the wiki calls them. So first, at the Cemetery of Ash, you pick up the Ashen Estus flasks from the corpse of what appears to be Oscar Vestora. So while you could explain it with a convolution, blah blah blah, I mean, come on, that's just fan service. It truly wasn't necessary. We could have picked up anywhere else. We could have just not even picked it up. It could have just been in our inventory. Like, come on. Then, next to the bonfire in Profane Capital, you can find the corpse of Leathersmith Gilligan from Dark Souls 2. And honestly, kinda pointless as well. Like, who cares about Gilligan? But I guess it wasn't meant to confirm the resemblance the cave of the Profane Capital has with the things betwixt. Okay, I'll accept it. Then there's the corpse of the Fair Lady and Quilana. I think this gives a nice closure, to see Quilana finally having the courage to come see her sister in a final time before the almost extinction of demons by the Black Knights. So even if she died from sickness, it was with Quilana, and we hope at peace. It was a bittersweet moment, and for once it's actually the place where they were, and it's not a convoluted moment like Gilligan or Oscar. Inside a cave in Fire Keep, there's a dead mushroom that resembles Elizabeth from Ulusil. There's also a chest that contains Dusk's dress, the intricate set. So, not fanservice, just hints at the lore that Fire Keep is actually a decayed Darkroot Garden, and Darkroot Garden is Ulusil. So, the old wolf of Farron and Sif, I mean, that's just a big wolf. Everything is big in this world. It's not because we had a wolf once that now doing another wolf is forbidden because wow, it's safe, guys. Havel's gear. It's even in Dark Souls 2, and it's not really fanservice. Havel's armor isn't unique, his dragon tooth is, but his armor was worn by all his men. So it makes sense to have multiple. And it's not just a random ass cave, there's actually a neat little story, and I recommend this short video from Zuli the Witch if you want to know more about this Havel soldier. Ornstein's weapon and armor are in Archdragon Peak, and personally, whenever there's an actual reason, actual new content and lore when bringing up something we've already seen before, I don't really mind it. This tells us that Ornstein seeked the Nameless King to serve him, and abandoned his armor to perhaps become one of the dragons we see in the Archdragon Peak Sanctum. The giant blacksmith corpse can be found in Arlondo, and I don't think it's really fanservice. I mean, what would they have put there anyways? And well, I think it's one of the most fanservice-y ones, because I mean, it's just a corpse compared to the Fair Lady who had something added with Quilana, but I'm not that bothered by it. And now before the conclusion, Patches is an immortal trans-dimensional being who travels from Propsoft Cave to another, and even if he wanted to, Miyazaki could not stop him. And for the Firekeepers, it's not good to king-shame Miyazaki. So now for the conclusion. Yeah, Dark Souls 3 is far from perfect, and it has some fan service, but I think some criticism is just misinformed. There is fan service, don't get me wrong, but it is pretty rare, and when it happens, there's often something added other than, oh look, this thing from Dark Souls 1, are you happy now? And other criticisms such as it has no personality, etc., is just kind of wrong. Dark Souls 3 has plenty of unique things to it. Also, Dark Souls 2 just made you forget what a sequel is. Dark Souls 2 remade everything, and it's not because Dark Souls 3 decided to take more from Dark Souls 1 that it's suddenly pointless and filled with fan service. And people who complain about it feeling unnecessary and made just to be made, it's one of the themes and messages of the game. The world is grey and faded, and you need to let go, or Dark Souls is only going to decay if more is produced. So that's also why I do not want a Dark Souls 4, or at least not from Miyazaki. But I do understand the feeling that some people have towards it, as I've talked about in my What Made the Old Souls games a great video. I talked about the lack of environmental and boss gimmicks, mystery, level design, experimental features, and radicalism in the modern Souls games, and that it was what made the Demon Souls and Dark Souls so great. But I think the combat, gameplay, the lore, bosses, DLCs, themes, and closure on the Dark Souls franchise makes Dark Souls 3 amazing. And yes, it doesn't totally makes up for the lack of the things that made the old Souls games great, not at all. It's just not the same. You can love it or hate it, but I choose to love both Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3. So yeah. And honestly, one of the reasons I made this video is because recently I got comments under some of my videos saying, haha, good video, I agree, also Dark Souls 3 is the worst game of all time. And I was like, okay. YouTuber hearts. Anyways, thank you for watching. Your presence till the end is appreciated. And bye, I guess.